So, could you please introduce yourself and what company you're with?
Hi, I'm Chelsea Hash. I'm with First Playable Productions. I've had a variety of roles over the last 4 years, and I also went to grad school at NYU Polytechnic. I went to the Social Game Lab with Catherine Isbister.
Oh, okay. So, when did you first realize you were sort of morphing into the technical art role, and what was your role before that?
Okay. So I started in the industry as a 3D artist, but very quickly, we didn't have any support. It was right when platforms were changing, and so my first task out of school was to get the first 3D model on our first 3D DS game. And nobody had done it before, so I was the artist doing it. And so coming from an engineering school, it was something that just naturally happened, even though I was educated as an artist. But I didn't know that was technical art. So it wasn't until I went back to grad school and kind of made that transition and then kind of looked at the industry at large and said, all right, well, I've been a 3D artist, a lead animator, a lead artist, a lead designer, and a producer. And why am I so disjointed? I actually thought there was something wrong with me. So, right now I'm saying I'm a technical artist because I actually came up with the term tech art liaison because I was like, well, I make programmers and artists get along. So, yes.
It's pretty cool. I'll have to probably edit this out, but I kind of envision this it gets better campaign, but for tech artists who aren't sure where they fit in.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard because if you're a tech artist, you end up you're doing all this artwork, but you never get final art in the game. You're just setting up the placeholders. You're getting the systems running. Maybe if you're a shader artist, but then you get to this code part, and you're not a huge programmer. You're not necessarily a tools programmer. There's a whole software engineering aspect to making hardcore tools. So, a tech artist can feel kind of like this, odd man out sometimes, even though you're doing really important stuff and people love you usually. So it's tough.
Okay. Can you provide an example from a project you worked on that required your specific skills as a technical artist?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was a lead animator on the Go Pets, we were trying to get PC game art onto the DS, and that was tough because it was a pet game that had tons of clothing and facial animations, and then full facial rigs. So one of my favorite tasks was negotiating with off-site programmers to get a bunch of PC assets that had full rigging and coming up with a system that would work on the DS. So it was a system of making flat meshes and testing a facial animation system that was based off of a text file. So it was IFL. So it was an image file list of all of the animations. And so it's once I got that working once, it was training the artists. They're I know this is somewhat painful, but I swear it looks good. But at the end, you could put the PC, our original source art, up next to the DS quality art and zoom it out to DS size, and you couldn't tell the difference. And I was like, that is success.
Excellent. So now, did you come from the art side or from the programming side into this role?
Yeah,
primarily?
definitely came from the art side, but I always had a love of programming. So I was an electronic arts major, but I jumped straight into Comp Sci 2 because I heard Comp Sci 1 was and I had a lot of help. And so I guess that's the other thing is it's are your best friends programmers? That's kind of another way to do that is to just love programmers and what they do without necessarily having to be the best one, I think the best way to get that done is have your best friend as the best programmer. And then, with an art background, you can make a lot of good stuff happen.
That's the first time I've heard that advice. But I guess also if you have that kind of affinity if you can hang out with programmers and they don't, we think differently. Programmers think differently than artists. I've experienced this firsthand.
Yeah.
So if you can
it's that liaison. It's that being in between that's really important. And I think, I think there's a question that answers that. So go ahead.
Well, it's okay. We could throw this all out.
Yeah.
How about what kinds of self-directed learning do you find yourself having to do to remain or to become effective TA?
I think the really big thing is learning things on the fly. I always have things I wish I could do, I'm not a shader programmer, but I really want to be, but I have to wait for that to come up. I learn through projects, so every project I'm looking at it as an opportunity to learn a new technique and what needs to be done to get this project done. I think that's a big thing for education because it's very hard to sit down and just generate problems for people to fix and have them be compelling. Like you can kind of make up dinky problems, but it's not really the same thing. And so actually during the tech artist talk, I talked about, being not a TA tech artist, but a teaching assistant, because you're just solving weird problems and kind of getting comfortable with the idea that just because you don't know right this second doesn't mean you can't figure it out. So that's pretty much the best directed learning is trying to keeping your mind open actually to what might be the best answer instead of retreating to what you're familiar with.
Okay. What types of mathematics do you use regularly?
The most common math is trigonometry. I love trig. And then, we're no, computers are less afraid of floating point operations now, but discrete math is never not going to be important. The things I wish I had learned the most was matrix math and linear algebra. I constantly regret not having taken those courses, and every time I move somewhere new, I'm like, maybe there will be a college that will let me audit this class because I really want to know. Okay. Yeah, I spent the whole time on this plane over here trying to figure out a trig identity, and it's I swear to God, I think it's literally impossible, and that's why I can't figure it out. But it just feels like it shouldn't be, and I just, it's I wish I had done even more, just trig.
That's just an amazing, another thing about a tech artist that, you're going to take an entire flight from the East Coast thinking about trig identities.
I had all these people on tap. I had one of my friends has a master's in mathematics, and then I had a couple programmers because they just tend to be good at math. And I'm like, check this out. I made a diagram, and I sent it to everyone I knew, and I'm like, you see this? And everyone's like, oh, this should be doable, but nobody can get it. And I think it just seems doable. And that's I guess that's the spirit of tech art. It's like, maybe... I don't know if this is possible. It's possible. We can do this. No, I figured it out. I actually figured it out. I found another person here. It's possible, but you have to do it with trial and error. So, binary search tree.
Oh, okay.
Done. But, but it was it happens, and then it's really exciting. It's this problem solving, is it incredibly exciting to you, or you're I just don't want to get it done. And that's kind of something that comes up with the talks a lot, is it's something that you kind of just start to feel it. You start to, you are the type of person that likes this stuff. Some people really don't like all that uncertainty. They want to be able to plan, and they want to be prepared. And you're almost never prepared because this changes too often.
How about, was there any really crazy math you had to teach yourself for a particular project?
Yeah, right now I'm starting to think I might need to do a derivative if I wanted to do this precisely. But I think going back and forth will be good enough to identify it. Or I need to figure out an angle for scientifically realistic fish locomotion. It's tough. But anyway, so in terms of really crazy math, I need to figure out how to do color math on a shader to make it look like fish vision. And I actually don't think it's as crazy as you might think, but it's keeping track of tons and tons of matrix identities. And so again, matrix math. Learn matrix math.
How about, what sort of low-level technical concepts did you find yourself running up against and having to really understand deeply in order to be effective as a tech artist?
I think the hardest thing, this might not exactly be the answer to this question, but I think the hardest thing is that you get used to being able to just wing it for stuff garbage collection. If you're really used to scripts and just using JavaScript and C Sharp, you can kind of forget that, C++, you have to be much more careful about allocating memory, and you get used to dynamic arrays and vectors, and so I don't know if this is exactly it, but it's choosing to hit the, to get lower, and have to deal with all of the nitty-gritty, which can feel like it's too time-consuming. So then it kind of gets into the specialization issue, where it's sort of the lower level you get, the more specialized you are.
Right. So if there was one thing you could tell academics, about what the role of a TA is, what would you tell us? What do we need to know?
Yeah. I would say absolutely require people to take programming classes, at least one. And then if people to train a technical artist, require at least one programming class and at least one hardcore 3D art class. You have to produce models and animations. If people really like both, they're probably a great problem solver. And the number one thing with programming courses, even if you're not going to be a tools developer, is that it's debugging skills. So, if you're naturally doing well with those things, the tech artists will rise to the top, and then providing these classes that are more specific then from there. I think the danger with tech art is just being a really crappy programmer and a crappy artist and not solving any problems. So the other aspect of that is making sure that you're really good at problem solving and that you can solve a problem well and that you're not just finding the first easy solution. So I think that's the danger. Pretty much any educational course that ends up being like, you know, trying to create people that people are used to just having, you know, finding themselves, you know, appearing out of the woodwork. There is no such thing as an entry-level version of it. Is that you start to try to make the easy button something that's inherently a person skill. So, like being a TA, RIT, you know, I went to RPI, so sorry RPI, but RIT is a really great co-op program where you have to go and, like, you have to learn on the fly. So I think for technical artists, having things like you need to be a TA for courses. I was a TA for animation courses when there was no TA that was funded for that course. I actually had, was it the federal, like some federal work study grant, and I was signed up to be in the library, and then I had an animation class at the time of orientation, and they didn't need me at the library, and I wasn't there to sign up, so they canceled me. So I had a work study, but no work. So I just went up to the teacher and was saying, hey, I want to be a TA. I have funding already, haha. And so I think a lot of schools don't have TAs for a lot of classes that need them. So like if there could be kind of like a tech artist like subset or minor, and if you could get credit for that. Because at one point I lost my work study, and then I just started getting credit for being a TA. So that would be really kind of an interesting option.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to just contribute, or?
I think tech art is definitely a special field. It's a special field, and people do fall into it. You should make people feel okay for being good at both, but I still am wary of people using it as a crutch for not being good at either. So you should be really good at problem solving, not just okay. I feel like problem solving is the core tenet, and so like maybe just as an aside, I didn't get these classes and I wish I did, but RPI had some really great cognitive science courses, psychology. So like, you know, people are talking about soft skills, people will naturally have them or not. I don't know how much like training you want to really put into it, but things in cognitive science that kind of like enhance those things. I think having them in the curriculum or having them as viable options will also allow people to self-select. So I think it's, you know, it definitely is something that should be permitted within that range and should probably be required.
Okay. Chelsea, thank you very much. This was a great interview.
Cool.